how do you even begin to wrap your head around a country as vast and complex as India? Well, for anthropologists, the answer is to start small, really small. In this explainer, we're going to build a foundational guide to the key concepts of Indian anthropology, putting it all together one piece at a time. Okay, let's just dive right in.
So here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the village, which is really the heart of rural India. Then, we'll get into the ancient social pillars, caste and tribe. After that, we'll load up our analytical toolkit to see the bigger picture, before facing the real-world challenges of a changing India. And finally, we'll see how anthropologists actually figure all this stuff out. Think of it as a journey where we build our understanding together, layer by layer.
All right, first up, the Indian village. To get a handle on the sheer scale of Indian civilization, early anthropologists started small. The idea was, if you can understand the village, you've got a window into a much, much larger world. So what's the big idea here? It's this concept of the microcosm. You had anthropologists like McKim Marriott who saw these villages not as isolated little bubbles, but as miniature universes. They believed each one reflected the patterns of the entire civilization, just on a scale you could actually observe and study. This slide, man, this captures a huge shift in thinking. For a long time, understanding India meant being buried in ancient texts, what they called the book view. But then, anthropologists started embracing the field view. This meant actually getting out there, living in villages, and observing society as it was happening. It was a massive leap from abstract theory to lived reality. Okay, so we've got our setting, the village. Now let's bring in the key players, caste and tribe. These are really the twin pillars that have structured Indian society for centuries, and you can't understand village life without getting a grip on them. So, what exactly is caste? I mean, really. It's way more than just social class. It's this incredibly complex system of hierarchy that traditionally dictated pretty much everything, from your job to who you could marry, all held together by powerful ideas of ritual purity and pollution. And on the flip side, you've got the tribe. It's like a whole different world compared to the rigid hierarchy of caste. Here, it's all about community, about kinship. Life tends to be much more egalitarian, rooted in a deep, powerful connection to the land, often in some of the most remote and beautiful parts of the country. So, what's the bottom line? How do we keep these two straight? This table lays it out perfectly. Just look at that top row. Caste, strictly hierarchical. Tribe, generally egalitarian. That one difference right there, that's your key to unlocking the social fabric of rural India.
Okay, so if caste creates all these divisions, you gotta wonder what actually held village society together. For centuries, the answer was the Jajmani system. You can think of it as the economic glue of the village. It was this intricate web of mutual obligations where different castes exchanged services for goods. Its slow disappearance today, that's a huge reason why rural life is changing so dramatically.
All right. We've met the players, we've seen the stage. Now it's time to put on our special analytical glasses. In this next part, we're going to unpack the key concepts, the intellectual toolkit, really, that anthropologists use to look past the surface and understand the deep currents shaping Indian society.
I love this concept. Think of Indian culture as flowing in two directions, like a big river and its local streams. You've got the great tradition. That's the big, formal, pan-Indian stuff from scriptures and epics. But then you've also got the little tradition, all the local, vibrant folk customs of the village. And the coolest part? They're always talking to each other, always mixing. And that talking to each other has a name. It's universalization and parochialization. Universalization is when a local belief or practice goes big, it gets absorbed into the great tradition, and parochialization is the other way around. A big national idea gets a local makeover. It's just a great reminder that culture isn't static, it's a living, breathing conversation. Now, how do you even begin to understand a worldview where nature, people, and the spirit world aren't separate things but are all woven together? L.P. Vidyarthi's Nature, Man, Spirit complex is a fantastic tool for this. It shows us this sacred triangle where the environment, society, and belief are totally inseparable and constantly influencing one another, especially in tribal life. So, in any given village, who's actually in charge? Well, it might not be who you think. Emin Srinivas gave us this brilliant concept of the dominant caste. This is a group that holds the real power, not just because of ritual status, but because they have the numbers, they own the land, and they've got political muscle. It's a really important reminder that power is way more complicated than a simple hierarchy. But here's a little twist. Tribe and caste, they aren't always these neat, separate boxes. It's better to think of them as two ends of a long spectrum, a continuum, and lots of communities fall somewhere in the middle, borrowing traits from both. It tells a fascinating story of how cultures blend and change over time.
So, what happens when these ancient ways of life slam into the modern world? In this fourth section, we're going to look at those fault lines where tradition and modernity collide, creating huge challenges and sometimes new opportunities. Yeah, this slide, it really lays out the tough reality facing many tribal communities today. We're talking about losing their ancestral lands, being displaced for big development projects, getting trapped in debt. I mean, the list goes on. This is the real human cost when these two worlds collide. So why is this clash often so destructive? Well, let's go back to that nature-man-spirit complex we talked about. When a dam gets built and floods a sacred valley or a forest is clear-cut, it's not just an economic problem. It's a spiritual crisis. It shatters that fundamental bond between people, their environment, and their beliefs. And that's a wound that goes incredibly deep.
Okay, but how do we know all this? How do anthropologists get this deep understanding? The answer is fieldwork. It's the absolute heart and soul of the discipline, the engine that drives all this knowledge. The key method, the secret sauce of anthropology, is something called participant observation. This isn't about standing on the sidelines with a clipboard. No way. This is about immersing yourself in a community, living there for a long time, participating in daily life, all while observing what's going on. It is the foundation of that field view we mentioned right at the start.
So where did this all come from? Well, it's got a pretty complex history. It kind of started with colonial administrators documenting things, but the real transformation happened after the 1950s. That's when Indian anthropologists themselves, people like M.N. Srinivas and L.P. Vidyarthi, stepped up and developed these powerful new theories. It was really the discipline finding its own voice. All right, we've covered a lot of ground. We've looked at the village, the social structures of caste and tribe, and the awesome concepts that help us make sense of it all. So let's pull it all together now and look at the big picture. And there it is, your conceptual pyramid. Think of it like this. The base, your starting point, is the Indian village. The pillars holding everything up are caste and tribe. The lenses you use to see clearly are concepts like the tribe-caste continuum. The motion, the thing that's always changing, are the modern problems they face. And the foundation holding the whole thing up? That's ethnographic fieldwork. If you can remember this pyramid, you've got a fantastic framework for your studies.
And that brings us to our final thought. As India charges into the future, what happens next? How will this dynamic, age-old relationship between caste, tribe, and village life continue to shift and reshape what it even means to be Indian? That's the big question. And the answer? Well, it's being written right now, every single day.